Hello, everybody, and welcome. I hope you're prepared today because we're getting into the advanced user interface guide. Now, the earlier guide we talked about what was capable within just the Final Fantasy XI user interface. Today, we're going to talk about a couple of overlay softwares and things that help the game run better or give you more information. Now, be warned, there is some things you can do with these tools that let you outright cheat. And where you draw the line of the outright cheating, it varies from player to player and the company. But I'm going to talk about where I draw the line, and I won't be getting into anything that I think is cheating, or at least explaining how it's done. But if you're paying enough attention, you will probably be able to figure it out on your own. I would encourage you guys to try to play the game as best as you can without that. It tends to ruin some of the reward. But let's get started, shall we? The first tool I want to talk about is this little box right here that I'm putting my mouse around. This is called Equip Viewer, and it's actually a pretty recent tool. It wasn't always available on the Windower. Normally, you had to add it unofficially, and I'm going to be explaining how to do that for a couple of other tools. But the developer behind this tool has been working so hard on it that the Windower has added it to their main set. Now what it does is it actively shows what gear you are currently wearing. And you'd think that that may not be important in some MMORPGs, but Final Fantasy XI is all about the gear you are currently wearing. So, for instance, if I hit my weapon skill macro, you'll see my gear switch for a moment to weapon skill gear and then back. And a lot of things do that. And a lot of that, and a lot of the expertise in this game is knowing when to wear what gear and what gives you the maximum effect. So making sure that those macros are timed properly, like for instance, if you're a mage and trying to make sure that you're no longer on your fast cast set and on a potency set to make sure your magic does the maximum effect. This tool does that and helps with that a ton. Now, that's through something called the Windower, and I'd like to talk about that. So I'm going to bring a little incognito window over Final Fantasy XI right now so we all can see that. Woohoo! So the Windower can be found at windower.net, and it's this nice little website, and I just want to read the why use Windower section because I think they've summarized really well why you would want to use it. We attempt to bring many positive enhancements to the game while striving to not hurt other players' gaming experience. Our goal is to make the game more enjoyable and enhanced in the areas that the PlayStation 2 is holding the game back. I think that's a really good summary. Now, there is some tools that people wind up writing on the side that let you bot or do other shadier practices, like completely break the rules of the game, like being able to walk while bound or not getting knocked back, etc. And I try to discourage those. There is a couple unofficial add-ons that I will get into though, and I'll explain why I use them. But to download the Windower, you would just click here, and then that would start it in the download, and then you'd open up the MSI and dump it where you would want. And once you've unzipped it, it would wind up bringing it over to a folder, and you would see something more along the lines of this. Now, it wouldn't all be filled out until you've properly opened it, and it's going to do a bunch of little downloads and updates and find your Final Fantasy XI install. And sometimes it may even need to ask for help if you don't have it in a normal place where it defaults to. But we're going to slide this to the side for now because I want to talk a teeny bit more about Windower. So you'll see two buttons here, the developer build and the stable release. I would say if you're new to this, to just do the stable release. Some people like to have both because they test new features, but your game will crash more often if you're on the development build because they mess with a lot of new ideas here. Once that's downloaded and installed, you'll be able to get started setting it up. But before we get into that, I want to point out one other tool, and that is Ashita. Now, I personally don't use Ashita so I don't want to speak about it too much. But the developer who manages this is a very nice person, and they're very helpful on the Final Fantasy XI auction house website, and they're also very helpful in the private Final Fantasy XI community as well. And a lot of my Link Shell mates use this and swear by it. So I think it really comes down to preference. Some of these tools are different, and some are not available that are on the Windower. Personally, I'm just comfortable with the tools that the Windower has available, so I haven't moved on. But maybe sometimes I'll give this a try more seriously. But I did want to point it out because the developer before this is such a nice person, and they are still actively managing this project. Now, let's get this out of the way for now. Going back to the Windower, you'll see that we have the Windower exe, settings, hook, console, videos. This will be videos you capture, updates, scripts, screenshots that you capture. The big ones you're looking for here is going to be add-ons and plugins. This is where the ones that you download will be installed, and unofficial ones. This is the folder that you would want to be putting them in, is in the add-ons folder. So I'll be getting into some of those. What I would do after unzipping them is put their folder in here, and that will let the Windower be able to open it. But we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves. Let's bring over an actual Windower folder. So this is the Windower, and this is it open. Now, it's a little bit basic right from here. You'll see default profile. You can add various profiles and settings depending on, oh, I'm playing a pet job this day, and I have a setup with all my pet add-ons turned on. You can very much tweak this to your needs. But if you hit the pencil, it'll wind up bringing up more of the settings that you would have in the Final Fantasy XI config tool. Your resolution, how the window mode is. Borderless window is a full screen, but you can still move the mouse outside of the window or access like the start menu, for instance, without crashing the game. Window lets you have a not full window, and full screen is more original to what it played like before. Region, auto detect North America. Console key, this brings up the window or console and all of its commands. So this is defaulted to the insert key. Then when you come over to game, you'll see things like hardware mouse. I like to have this turned on, but that's because I use a different add-on called DGvoodoo, and I'll get into that. Sound, I do like to have turned on, even though I keep the sound turned off a lot sometimes when I listen to music at YouTube, etc. But I do want the option. Always play sound makes the sound play even when you're away from your window or minimized from the window. And I do keep this turned on, but mainly for recording purposes in case I'm clicking away and I still want the fidelity of the recording to stay strong. Super sampling is just pulls from different pixels and I believe tries to double them. I do have this turned on, it makes the game look better. Bump mapping. I've had this turned on before, but a lot of times in modern Final Fantasy XI setups and modern Final Fantasy XI GPUs, this results in a lot more flickering that I liked on flags and various things that are on maps, and it actually seems to make the game look worse. The game runs more stably for sure, but there's a lot of flickering on thin surfaces and things, so I actually have this turned off myself. Always enable gamepad means that your gamepad will stay active even when you're clicked away. Same essential explanation to the always play sound. MIP mapping is how much quality essentially to pull from for the data of the game. I would always say at least have this one up, but if you have a higher quality computer, you can turn it all the way to max. User interface scale, if you use the zoom feature in Windows, like 150% or etc., this helps make sure that the user interface matches your zoom level. Gamma is just the brightness. I have mine turned up a little bit just because I do have darker settings for when I watch shows and stuff on my screen. And advanced is just to allow the Windows key. So that's essentially the settings that you would go through to how to make it look. Let's go back. You would see the plus button for creating more profiles. The pin makes a shortcut for your desktop. And then there's launch, of course. But before we do all that, let's look over add-ons and plugins, you'll see that this actually goes in alphabetical order. There is a lot. You'll see different icons as well. Like you'll see these arrows. That means that it hasn't been downloaded on this computer yet, but it is available for download. Then you'll see things like where it says off, and that means it was downloaded, but it's currently set to off as a default setting. So, that being said, I'm just going to quickly go over some of these, and you'll see which ones I have on based upon the green. So, auto echo uses an echo drops right away whenever it detects you're silenced if you have an echo drop in your inventory. Now, this sounds really useful, and it is, but sometimes you don't want to be chugging an echo drop right away. You'd rather benediction or somebody silencing you, and you don't want to take a moment to chug a drink, and you want to make your own choices. So, I actually have this set to off, but it's useful, especially when you're new. Announce target, it creates a chat message when you grab somebody. I hate any of this kind of stuff that clutters the chat. Usually, this stuff is annoying. If you are only using text chat, it might be more useful. I personally use voice chat myself. Auto control, or sorry, answering machine, I'm skipping. Stores tells that you receive for later recall. This I should probably start using more often, honestly. So I think I'll click to download that for now and just put it off. But yeah, this is something I imagine that fills a text document that you can go back to in case you crash or you're away and you won't miss messages. Auto control. This lets you, if you're a puppet master, save specific puppet master sets and then change those sets with text commands. It's very useful. I know it sounds complicated, but if you're a puppet master, you understood exactly what I'm saying. So, auto enter key, it essentially lets you just keep going through cutscenes without having to hit the enter key or the A button over and over and over again. Personally, I like this when you're watching cutscenes and doing missions, but if you're going through menus, it'll also automatically hit the enter key for you on augments and other things. And that can be very problematic. Auto invite automatically invites players when a tell is sent with a specific keyword. I don't like this type of stuff. Or auto join can get you in trouble sometimes, so I don't do it. Auto RA. This will turn your range attacks into an automatic attack, kind of like akin to how you auto attack with melee weapons. It's good on everything except Ranger. Ranger's been introduced with hover shot, and you have to actually move as you shoot. So, yeah, don't use this on Ranger. Azir sets. Remember all that stuff I said about Puppet Master a couple minutes ago? This is the same thing for Blue Mage. It lets you save your spell lists and switch them quickly with text commands. But keep in mind, when you change Blue Magic, you can't cast Blue Magic for 60 seconds. Bar filler. If you like those big bars to watch as see how much more you have to go to level up, this is for you. I'm more preferent to see numbers myself. Battle mod. We're going to take a moment to talk about battle mod. This to me is one of the most important ones in the list. It cleans up your chat and essentially makes it more efficient. So if I were to cast a protect on somebody or Protectra and hit all my party, instead of it taking up 6 lines of chat, battle mod would turn it into 1 line of chat saying, Shuko cast Protectra, and it hit these 5 people. It's wonderful. And you can customize it too. The customizing gets very complex, and I'd suggest you do a lot of reading before you start modifying your filters on this. But it is amazing. Now, Battle Stations lets you remove or change default battle music. It's a lot of fun sometimes. B-list is more advanced blacklist option. I'm not really interested in blacklisting people in that manner. Blue alert. Oh, we tell jokes about this in the link shop. If there's a blue magic used that you haven't learned, even if you're on a non-blue mage job, you'll hear this woman's voice say, unknown blue magic detected, or something like that. And yeah, we hear this a lot during events, so there's some mocking of this one. Blue Guide lets you change your blue magic with a more user interface friendly one. instead of just text commands. Bonanza lets you check your marbles after bonanzas. I've never tried this in the modern ones, so I'm not entirely sure if it works, but they have changed the math. Box Destroyer, it helps you try to figure out the codes for chests in areas you're in, and kind of breaks down the math a little, and it's like, your best guess would be between this, and helps you keep track of it. Cancel. This lets you cancel buffs through a text command, like your Utsasemi Shadows or Saber Dance, etc. You've probably heard me talk about this a few times in the past. Ape Trader lets you automatically trade ambuscapes for augmentation to the NPC. I've tried this, I couldn't ever get this to work, but I'm sure if you could, it's pretty useful. C-Block lets you work for FFO chat. I don't use FFO chat. Cell help, not too worried about that. I believe that helps you in salvage. Cars, or characters short, I'm assuming. Special characters like music note, etc. You can add those to your chat. You'll see people play with this a lot sometimes to make more interesting dynamic messages. Chat link is something that will let you open links that are posted in the Final Fantasy XI chat. This can be kind of useful, but sometimes I keep it off now because I've accidentally bumped links and loaded up a web page in the middle of battle, and that, yeah, don't do that. Chat Porter will sit here and put some of the things over in an alternate text box, and you can reply from as well. I personally don't use this, but it depends if you're using a multi-screen display or setup. I imagine you can do some pretty creative things with this. Check param is a more advanced version than the natural user interface. Usually you can type /check param, the character name, and it'll give you their statistics. This will let you look at even more advanced parameters, but it does add a little bit of lag, especially on older systems. Clock. It has an external on-screen clock. I think it takes up a lot of space. It shows moon phases and all types of stuff usually, so I'm not a fan. Usually you can just type /time or current time. Console BG. This I like. It adds a black background to the console. Otherwise, usually it looks like just a bunch of tiny red letters, and it can be hard to see. Craft, a Final Fantasy XI crafting add-on. I'm not a huge crafter, but I believe this adds a couple additional commands for some of the more repetitive, annoying things to take some of the grind out of it. Debuffed. You'll see a window pop up when I cast Enfeeblements, and sometimes in big events, and there'll be a bazillion Enfeeblements on the monster, and that's what this is about. This shows all of them. And, well, except for Dancer Enfeeblements, which is a whole nother topic of conversation, but all the other stuff shows up. And it's not perfect. Its time of accuracy is a little off sometimes because it can't catch each player's duration, but it's still pretty good. Digger, this helps keep track of chocobo digging. It's kind of handy, but if you use the timers add-on, it shows your dig cooldown every time you change a zone. It's kind of annoying for me. Dimmer, if you go to Racing-Jima, this is kind of like a warp ring add-on too, except it pulls out your Racing-Jima ring, puts it on, and will warp you there. A lot of things you'll see me type /dim. It's just like, oh, I want to go to Racing-Jima, put on my ring, and warp me there if I have one on cooldown. Distance, this was the original one that showed how many yalms you were from a target. Very good add-on. However, if you look below, you see Distance Plus. Same thing, but with color to change. So it starts to turn green when you're in range of magic, or it's grayed out when you can't reach somebody, etc., etc. So I would go with Distance Plus. Dress Up. This is what the new version of Blink Me Not, and it prevents people from blinking and will let you lock people's gear specifically in certain things. I do have it available for certain content, but I don't force it on in a lot of cases, because as a Link Shell leader, I wind up pointing out to people who blink too much that not every healer uses the Windower. Dynamis Helper. This will let you keep track of original Dynamis' stuff. and how many things you have to do, how much currency you've gotten per time, what the procs are. I don't use it because I don't farm Dynamis a ton myself, but it is something to be aware of. Easy nuke. This will let you handle single target nukes and cures and stuff. I don't like things that automatically change my gear into something else, like gear swap going too heavy, but you can get some, imagine, useful things out of this with some proper tweaking. MP pop tracker. That would help you try to keep track of NM situations and what is involved in their process. It's pretty outdated. It only works on really old stuff. Enemy bar, great add-on. I use one called Enemy Bar 2, which has a lot more info and more bars. But if you want to keep it simple, this is a good one. Eternity. It's the same thing as the auto press enter, except it'll even speed up cutscenes too. It skips airship rides, it skips boat rides between Mara and Selbina. Yeah, it does a lot. A quick viewer. I already explained that one to you guys, and that's one of my favorites, but it's here on the list now. Eval. This lets you run outside Lua code. Not something I'm messing with. Fast cutscene. Same kind of thing as Eternity, but it works in the same way, just for the speed. FFOs, chat tool, not interested. Find all. Find all lets you wind up using all your inventory, key items, temporary items, all that stuff, other mule items on your same account, and it searches all of them for an item. And you can even use partial names. So like if you do / find all sword, it'll bring up every single sword. Game time gives more information about the current time, also has some points and stuff. I personally don't use it. Gear swap. Now I have this clicked on because I do use an XP ring tool sometimes, which will keep putting up my XP ring and use it when I'm grinding points. But that's about the only thing I use gear swap for. So this is very advanced though. Like you can have this change gear, you can add in scripts that let you change many aspects of gear. Be like, when I'm low on HP, switch to this. Whenever I'm running, switch to this. When I weapon skill, use this. When I spell, this, etc., etc., etc. I'm not going to get into a big rant about this. A lot of other videos talk about it, though. Guild tracker puts a little 14 style guild marker on your screen and how much guild you have. Highlight will highlight people's names in party or your name. Indie Nope is super useful if you're on a toaster computer. It takes away the glow AoE effects of auras and geomancy, and it'll wind up just eliminating their graphical effect, and that makes the computer and the game run much better. Info bar will display information about mobs up on the top of the screen. It usually only works on outdated mobs. Info replacer, similar concept. Insta LS, this prioritizes link shell loading first and the chat bar loading over anything else in the zone, which I like because I'm a chatterbox if you can't tell. Inventory tracker is something that helps you keep track of how much you have, what slots you have left. It winds up doing the little dots in 14 actually, which I love this add-on for a while, but it actually takes too much space on the screen, and honestly, as you get later in the game, your inventory is almost a full all the time, and you don't want something to remind you of that. Itemizer lets you move things around. I don't tend to mess with this. I get afraid of any type of bot program that could drop any of my legendary items. Job change. When near a Nomad Moogle or in a Mog house, you could type a command to change your job instead of having to go through the menus. Latent checker. There's some weapons and things in the game where you have to do something with the weapon hundreds of times, and then you trade it back in to complete a quest. This lets you do that without having to walk back to the NPC. Or it lets you see how much longer you have to go, or if you're done. Linkers lets you click links. Logger saves your logs onto your local computer. Lookup, old info, not really a fan. Lottery lets you auto lot or pass on certain things. Not a fan, but some people love it. So we're going to talk about Macro Changer. The add-on essentially will, when you change your job at a Moogle or in your Mog house, it'll change to a book and a page specified by you or default. And this is incredibly useful. So it essentially will spread each of your job's macro sets between the books. Mob Compass is an add-on that will tell you your position relative to the mob. And this is good for like sneak attacking, Geomancer, Luapons, and stuff like that. Mount Muzzle will let you stop or change the mount music if you don't like the Chocobo theme, for instance. Mount Roulette will change things to a random song when you get on a mount. My Home is super useful. You probably see me use it in a bunch of add-ons. And it will, if you have a Warp Ring, which is something that you get with Conquest points, you can type //home or //warp, and you will put on your ring and warp, or if you're a black mage, you'll cast warp, or if you have a warp scroll or some other warp item, and it'll bring you back to your home point. Super useful, super simple. No campaign music. If you're playing in the Shadow Rain era a lot and you hate that music that kicks in every time the Beastmen are attacking, you just turn it off. Nostrum is really great for mouse and keyboard users. It's a healer user interface that helps you heal, and it's pretty useful, to be honest with you. I'm not a mouse and keyboard user myself, but I know many healers who do use it that swear by it. Nizal Helper lets you keep track of Nizal Isle. OBOA will put your elemental OB on for certain spells if everything's matching. Automatic gear stuff, not a fan. Oshi is for keeping track of procs, specifically in Void Watch. Omen keeps track of your Omen things. I'd like this for a while. It takes up a ton of space, though, so I've tended to turn it off and just read the log now. But it is very useful, especially when you're new. Organizer lets you do inventory management, and it's something that freaks me out because I don't want things tossing my stuff out, but some people swear by it. Pet Fix. This stops your pet or you seeing your pet animations. There's some things I guess you could do with this. Personally, to me, it really messed up my timing. I think it probably did something more important in the past that since they've fixed. Pet School. I'm not entirely sure about this, but I believe it automatically changes the gear based upon what your robot is doing, and then will change your gear relative. So like if it sees that your puppet is casting, it'll put on stuff to make that maximized. Pet TP just shows the stats for them, and all pets very useful. Plasmon as a delve tool helps keep track of that. Plugin Manager lets you have easier commands for managing that kind of stuff in here. Points Watch. So if people like bar filler, I like Points Watch. It shows a lot of really good information across the bottom of my screen, and I'll point that out to you right now. That's this stuff down here. You'll see that it says I'm capped out on XP, merits are capped, XP per hour, JP, those are capped, CP per hour, and then my EP as well. And then if I was in Dynamis or something like that, that would also change. So, Porter lets you look at Porter slips, etc. Frankly, I use Find All, which does better. Position Manager, it lets you change where people's names kind of are positioned in the login. And honestly, I may mess with this a little bit more. I'm not even messed with it too much yet. Pouches, super useful add-on, will let you use an item over and over and over again until you're out of them. This is good for those learning books, for like learning dagger skill, for instance, or magic skills. But also if you're farming things and you see they wind up going through a lot of that type of item and you need to open up a lot of things. Roar, it makes a annoying cat roar whenever the dragon popped. Reeves keeps track of Reeves. Remember, this tries to help reload things that didn't properly load in the zone. It doesn't work perfect, but it's better than nothing. Sometimes you still gotta reload in the zone. FFO chat tool. Rhombus, I haven't messed with this much, but some people really do like to try to customize a new user interface from scratch. Records of Eminence Tracker. Roll Tracker. This is the Corsair's tool of love. This thing's amazing. And every Corsair, and even if you're not a Corsair, I would have this turned on. I've been going back to it. It tells you luckies, unluckies, all of it. This is so good. Potency. Salvage tools. We all hate salvage, but it's useful if you're farming that for Alexandrite. Satacast. Scoreboard is a parsing tool. Send is a tool that lets you send something to a separate instance of Windower, aka multi-boxers. Set BGM lets you change the music of the game. Set target lets you change the target from ID. You ever notice how you can't do a macro that says target this thing or target this monster? That's because, you know, back in the day you used to have claim bots, etc. That isn't so much a problem now. But that's essentially the thing that works the same way. Shortcuts. This is really nice and winds up letting you add specific shortcut commands for inviting people, etc. Shout helper. Silence shuts off all the equipment change messages. Speed checker will show you the percentage of your speed run. So we'll pop down for that. I have that underneath my HP bar here. And that'll tell me if I have like a Corsair's roll, a Bolter's roll, etc. And then you can get up to 60% max, or you can even technically be minus as well with like gravity and stuff. Spellbook lets you keep track of how many spells you have and all what you have unlocked, your max. I have all spells currently, so I'm not too worried about that. STNA. This lets you just have a nah macro, and then it will automatically see what your weakness or what you have on you and then try to pick one. It's not that great, honestly, especially with how fast and bad ailments are in Modern. But, I mean, for basic just grinding points in some easy area, it would work. Stopwatch, it is what it says it is. Strat Helper, not too worried about it, but it's a stratagem management tool. Stubborn. Must have for link shells. I've had link shell events get ruined by accidental calls for help on the final boss, ruining it for everybody. Turn this on right away if you can. Sub-target. This is a way if you're again multi-boxing. I personally don't use it. Tab, it changes your tab key to NPCs instead of just everybody around you. Pretty good when you're doing like a server level boss. But also keyboard mouse player kind of thing. Target info, put some info across the top. Outdated mostly now. Temps, it says it makes buying temporary items from Esha NPCs easier. Maybe. Text lets you change on-screen text and whatnot. I've never messed with this too much. Treasure Hunter Tracker, very useful. Little indicator of what the Treasure Hunter level is on the mob. Timestamp. They have one in the natural user interface for this, so I don't need this, but some servers and private servers I hear don't. TP party. Well, they do let you see the TP of your party now, and others, but it's not foolproof. This still gives MP, TP for the entire alliance. Translate. It tries to translate certain basic phrases. Treasure pool. You'll see this a lot on mine, where it shows a big thing of the last 10 things in the pool, and who has the highest lots on them. Treasury and inventory management tool. Trusts. With this, you can set up certain favorite trusts that you have, and they will wind up being able to be summoned again. So, like, let's say you like Shantoto, Amchuchu, Joachim, Korumoru, and your UC trust or whatever, and they're all out. You could do //true save favorite, and it'll be like, this is now saved as favorite, and then later, whenever you're in a zone, you can type //true favorite, and you'll summon them if you're in an area where you can summon trusts. Really useful if you don't like looking through your trust list every time. Update. This is super useful tool that will try to look for any updates on the Git for any of your add-ons. By just typing //update. Very simple tool, very powerful. Visible favor. This displays a bubble around your avatar, making it more Geomancer-like, so you can kind of have a better idea of the range of favors. Void Watch HL. This is kind of like Oshi. XIV bar. This puts about 14 Final Fantasy 14 like user interface next to, or on the screen in general, showing TP, MP, and HP. I personally don't like this, even though I do like some 14 user interface add-ons. My one friend loves this and uses this all the time. Personally, myself, I like using the party add-on, and I tend to look at my HP from there. Yush, a file-based macro engine. This lets you kind of get more advanced macros from your macro bar. And then zone timer. Zone timer, I'm going to go back into 11 here. I have it down in the lower left here. It'll tell you how long you have been in a specific zone. And that can be useful for various things, like not all the older event has an active clock. So that's all the add-ons that Windor normally has, right? And there's a couple additional ones which we'll get into. But first, let's move over to plugins. Auto exec, multi-player kind of thing, something that something you would need. Bidder, this lets you open auction and delivery boxes anywhere. From what I've heard, this is how Edge and Kate got his one character banned, but that's just a rumor, probably. Honestly, I try not to risk going to auction house or anything outside of just being in front of an auction house. And we'll get into what this symbol is here in a second and what that means. Binder, you'll see bind macro keys to your gaming keyboard or mouse. I'm a controller player, but I imagine that's really useful for keyboard mouse users. Chatmon adds an audible alert to the response to chat events, so you get like a ping. Kind of annoying for me personally, so I don't use it. Config, this is how you get 60 frames a second, is this add-on. And you can change a couple of other things too, so this is a must-have. And you have to actually type the command to get 60 frames in-game. Delay me not. So for keyboard mouse users, this is a must-have. It makes it so your alt and control macro bars come up instantly instead of within a second. Must-have. However, if you're a controller user, what it does is it makes it so you have to hold the button for your macro bars to come up. So if you're a controller player, you actually don't want this on. FFO chat tool, screw that. FFXI DB, this is the minimap add-on, and God bless it, it's amazing. Fishing crash fix, I think that this works already and isn't necessary. I can fish no problem in the game. Guildwork. This is a great add-on that links to guildwork.com and helps get your info linked in to Final Fantasy Auction House as well. It doesn't always work, and honestly, it doesn't even see that I'm in my own link shell right now, which sucks and is annoying, because I can't change my Discord invite on it. But, you know, I know that these people mostly work for free and are just trying to make the game better, so I don't want to insult too hard either. IME, it lets you try to use Japanese input method editor. You have to enter everything twice, so as cool as it sounds, it's a little annoying. Info bar, another info bar tool, mostly outdated. JA0 and packet flow, we're going to get back to those in a second. Light luggage lets you automatically stack inventory. Regular interface has this already, so I tend not to use it. Run lets you run external applications through the windower. A little useful sometimes if you're a multitasker. Sandbox, something I don't use. SSO organizer is another FFO chat, I believe. Status timer, this isn't necessary in the game. We have this pretty good through the normal interface, but I hear some of the private servers need this. Tickle, when you rest, it'll tell you how long till your next tick. Timers. I have this next to my equip viewer, and you'll see this a lot, and you can customize this a lot. There's a mini version, there's a bigger version, caps, pet job abilities, buffs. It's super useful, but it does take up a lot of the screen, and I had to customize it a lot until I found out how I liked it, and we'll get into that a teeny bit. Weathermon lets you track and play alerts based on weather changes. This isn't super useful, but it's... all you really just gotta do is look to the lower left. Oh, that's the weather. wind control. This lets you change a lot of the Windower add-ons just by clicking them and moving them around like windows. Super useful. So we're going to go back to JA0 and Packet Flow here. And you saw that other one, the bidder, and you see the little icon. This plugin is not supported. Now these are actually in Windower. They're hidden. I don't know how many of you guys know the Konami code, but if you were to boot up Windower right from here and then click plugins and then punch in the Konami code on your keyboard, not your controller unfortunately, it will load those. Now the reason they hide them, I suspect, is because it does request the Final Fantasy XI servers a little bit more, but Windower still, even the ones they have here, are not botting. They're not cheating specific rules. They're not advantages that let you make more money than other players and things like that, or get the monster ahead of time. It's tools that make the game more fun to play for you. And for that reason, I also support these. And I think the only reason that Final Fantasy XI devs let these go on without banning players is because they don't have a lot of people over there. They're working very hard just to keep the players happy. And honestly, if they had the time and the people, I imagine they would have implemented these things in the game themselves already. But I really thank Windower team for having some method of these. So that being said, on that rant, JA0 eliminates job ability lock. So that's how sometimes you'll see me move right away when I get up from a raise. That's how you'll see me move when I do a jig. It plays, I think, with lock style. So when usually you're having to wait for animations to finish on you or for you to put your weapon away, instead you can actually still freely move and continue to move. And that just makes the game so much better to play, I can't even begin to say. And Packet Flow increases the bandwidth in instance zones. So essentially it demands, it's complex and I don't know exactly how it works, but it demands more data, like when you're in a dynamis or some type of instance zone, so that you have less lag or that things are a little more snappy. This works really good with segments and dynamics divergence and sortie in particular. And I'm a big fan of both of them. I don't think bidder's very fair though, and I have that turned off because I'm pretty sure that some people have gotten banned for its use. But even honestly, I'll be real with you, if Square Enix started banning me for these two, they literally just make the game more fun to play and they don't hurt anybody. So I would be sad, but they would just lose my money and my support. I really do love this game a lot, and I wouldn't want to try to ruin it for anybody else. So these are the ones that Windower has naturally. That being said, there's a couple that I use that aren't on this list. And to be more specific, there are 4 of them. So let's talk about those. I'm going to move my browser in here. So we talked about the Windower and the Sheeta page. The first one is called XIV Party, and it can be found on this link here. On that note, there we go. I just wanted to get a little dummy list up. So this is XP or XIV Party. It's based on Final Fantasy XIV user interface tools, but it uses Final Fantasy XI in-game information, and I love it. And it's not in the usual Windower interface. It pretty much just gives you all the same information you would see by targeting a player on here at the same time. Great for healing. Oh, look, this person is doomed, paralyzed. This person's petrified. Ailments come to the front, buffs are behind it, and they all got 2 terms. HP, TP, it's all here. So this is one tool. And that being said, that is found here. when you would download that, we're going to get into how you would install that. But that's the one tool I would use. The next tool that I use that's not on the main Windower list is called Skill Chains. And that is here. Now, when you use something, you'll wind up putting up a timer. And it gets red, but when it's green, that means it's able to be added to. And it will show you what you're available to add, but sometimes you're waiting for somebody else to add. Or sometimes you're adding to theirs. This is super useful for comboing with yourself and your friends, and you can get a lot of extra damage. And it just helps you have a lot more fun in this game, too, because it's such a complex process of combat that you wouldn't know what is what, you know? So it helps a ton, and I really think it's a great idea. Now, next, what I would suggest is the tool of enemy bar. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Here you go. And enemy bar is up here. And you can move these. Usually it will be down here, wherever. You can move them where you want. You can change the sizes. You can change if you want them to actually show who it's aggroing to, and action names, and yawn distance. All of this is customizable. But this is super, super, super useful. And so that's another one I use. Now I have all the demos up here for these. And I just want to explain that they are essentially the thing that I'm working on to get those things together. And you'll see these are the demo boards. So this isn't real information, but this is, you just type in setup and you'll be able to actually position it on your own screen so that you know the size and setup. And then when you'd be done, you would just type like XP setup. And that'll put that back to normal. XP hide solo. And then EB setup. And that goes away. And then skill chain move. And you can do these all with commands. And if you're unsure what they are, you can type skill chain help. And I'll show you the commands. And so on and so forth. All the add-ons have these. Now there's one last one I'm going to show you. And it's an old tool, so don't take it too seriously. It can't keep track of augments, etc. But, or actually I got to type it in first. But it's called gear info. And what it will do is it keeps track of your gear haste. Depending on the job you're on, this will change a little bit. But like gear haste, how much DT you're in and the set you're in, how much TP per hit. Not all this is accurate, especially with all the modern augments, but it's very good for kind of tracking your DT, your gear haste, and some other basic things like that. So I usually will do this when I'm making sets, and then I'll just get rid of it right away after that. Another tool I would mention is Smeagol. Smeagol is the XP ring tool I was telling you about. That you can essentially find over Ivar or many other different GitHub things I'm about to point out. But it just winds up changing your ring for you and moving it in. Now, here we're back into Windower. And so if you were to go and download one of those add-ons that I showed you, which I'm going to point you to the other quick links. This is where, again, XIV Party is. Next up is Enemy Bar 2. And there's a lot more than I showed you there, too, even aggro bars and stuff. That's where Enemy Bar 2 is. Skill Chains. And I believe you can also find the ring add-on here. Smeagol. And then gear info. Now, the tools I'm going to go into next, you can use the notepad from Windower, or from Windows, but another tool I would suggest is Notepad++, and that can be found here. Now that being said, let's go back to Windower. Once you've downloaded one and you've unzipped it with an unzipping tool like the one that's in Windows or 7-zip, etc., you'll go to it. So let's say skill chains, right? And you copy it into your add-ons folder. When it's in your add-ons folder, at first it's only going to have like the skill chains Lua, or maybe like a readme and a Lua. The data part won't be there yet. You'll have to come into here, into game, and type Lua load skill chains. And then in my case, it says it's already loaded. Yeah, it is. But for you, it would say skill chains loaded. And then you could come back here and you'll see the data part get added and some other things. In the data, you'll start to get something called settings. Now, when we bring this up, you'll see, well, in mine, I'm loading up Notepad++, which makes it a little more organized. You'll see you can change colors, different presets, the font. I like to change the font. I changed mine down to 8 because I think skill chains is gigantic at first on its default. But there's a lot in here that you can modify. And if you break it, you can just always re-download it and just add it in again. But that's how you would change the settings of some of these. And you can do this with timers and even some of the normal Windower ones as well. The next one would be XIV Party, right? And here's all their data I've moved in. And then, you could just go to the data thing. Up, there's the settings. And there's little things you can change as well. All add-ons work this way. And a lot of times you don't need to actually go into their XML settings. Translate. Party. And gear info. Where is it? Yeah, gear info. Same kind of thing. And you can add in other things. Like one thing, it's very old and the guy who made it doesn't make it anymore. So a couple of people have added additional things since, just to kind of keep it basically functioning. Enemy bar 2. Now, once they're in here, you ask, how would I get them to load every time without having to type that command? That looks annoying. And I'll get to that in just a sec. But first, I want to point out, in the plugins, it's a little different than add-ons. You'll see all the data stuff in here. And then you need to go over to settings. And that's where you'll see the XMLs for the settings. So for something such as timers, you would want to go in here. And you'll be able to customize how big they are, where they're located. And then if you want them on or not. I like to have slim mode turned on. That's why mine are smaller looking. And so you can adjust a ton from here. What size you want them to be, what the caps are. Like I like 10, 10, and 2. Now, the last thing I'm going to point about the user interface, and I appreciate you guys for staying this long, is how do you get it to load every single time? And that is through scripts. In here, you'll see this little text document called init.txt. It's a very basic document, right? And see these lines all the way up to bind v paste? Those are mandatory Windower stuff. Don't mess with any of that unless you know what you're doing. But then, under here, I just add those lines. Lua load enemy bar 2. Lua load XIV party. Lua load skill chains. And there we go. And then once you save it, every time you load up Windower, assuming that you've gotten those to properly load and set up and be installed, they will load every time for you. So on that note, back to Final Fantasy XI, right? This is how I have what I have set up. And you'll see I have my enemy bar down here. I have a treasure hunter tracker that usually goes right below it. You see my party up there. Different information up here with my enemy bars information. And then sometimes I'll have my info for quests and enfeeblements over here, and the treasure that drops. And you could customize any of this to be wherever you want, however you want, whatever size you want. And there are even more add-ons than that. The last thing I'd like to point out is if you're trying to figure out how to get 60 frames, right now I'm running at 57.2. And a way that I can change that would be through typing... Actually, let's look it up specifically, just so we can be actively correct. So, from here you would type /config frame with the caps, and then 1 for 60. It would be 2 for 30 and 0 for unlimited, but I usually keep it to 60. Now, let's say I change it to 0, right? Or 2 for 30 frames. Oh, look at that horribleness. Oh, I'm a sad Shuko. Yeah, it looks a lot worse. But then, change it back to 60. Yay! See how much better that and smoother that is? So these are the types of ways that you can make Final Fantasy XI more beautiful, and you can customize your user interface with the Windower. Or Ashita even though I don't know a ton about that, but I'm sure there's a lot of info from them as well. They seem really friendly. So the last tool I'd like to talk about before we close this video, and I want to thank you guys so much for paying attention this far, is DGvoodoo. Now, this is another complex tool, and it has another download, and I wanted to do it separately. But essentially what it is kind of like an emulator of a graphics card, or it runs things, it allows your graphics card to run smoother with such an older game, and enables things that Final Fantasy XI doesn't actually emulate very well in modern hardware. So first, let's bring in the website. And I'll have all of these links in the description, by the way, for everything I've talked about so far. And feel free to ask me questions in the comments too. But this is the link for DGvoodoo. And I know it says not secure, but Deji stuff is an old website. He takes care of it. And then you would download this one, the regular one. 2.9, 1.2 is the latest for now, at this point, 2022. And then you would unzip it and put it into a folder. And you would want to run it as an administrator, because it essentially is hacking. And some Windows versions are going to say, this is risky software, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, all the do-it-your-own risk warnings, I have used it without any problem on my computer. So, once you've downloaded it from there, and you unzip it, it'll look something like this. You'd right-click it, run as administrator, and then it's going to pop up like this. Now, what you would want to do is, from this screen, you'd want to go down and find your install for Play Online, which for me, since this is the default one. And then you'd want to say what you're running, which I'm running a 3060. Best available API, full screen, keep window aspect ratio, capture mouse. And that's pretty much it for this screen, for the general. You go down to Glide. I like Voodoo 2 at 8 by 12, 2 TMUs. I changed the onboard to 12. Unforced resolution, app driven, memory size to 4000 plus. With the 2 TMUs down here. Now, I do gamma ramp myself, VSync, that depends on your display though, and inactive app state. So that way it doesn't try to shut down and think that it's an idle app. Then moving over to DirectX, 3D accelerated card, still 4000, unforced resolution, Application controlled, disable alt-enter to change the state. Force vsync. Now, what I will tell you to do while you're testing to make sure it works is you want the DGvoodoo watermark on. It'll load and it'll be in the lower corner, and you'll know that it's actually working. And then once that's the case, all you do is you come back in here, go back to the play online setting, and unclick it and apply and OK. Now, what happens when this is done is this will put a file into your play online thing, and I'm going to show you that. But first, you also want to copy something else. So we're going to close this. If assuming you would have hit apply OK. And then from here, you would want to go to MS, X64, or apologize, X86, and you would want to get D3D8.dll. This is DirectX 8, which is what you can get Final Fantasy XI run, and you'd right-click copy it. I don't really need to, but copy here, or if you're in Windows 10, you have an easier copy button. And then you want to go to your local drive and get program files x86, play online, Square Enix, not Final Fantasy. You go into play online viewer. And you would dump that in here, D3D8 DLL, and assuming you properly saved the DGvoodoo the way I described, you will also see this configuration file. These two are required for DGvoodoo to overlay over all of this. And if you properly did it, the watermark should show up, and then you're safe to turn off the watermark. This makes the game run very smooth, even on really low-end hardware. I've used this on laptops and everything I've run Final Fantasy XI on for years. I very recently got this computer because of the PC parts drop, and you'll see by how many videos I've been uploading recently. And I'm grateful, and I've been enjoying it a lot. I've been loving making content, but I could play the game very well, even on old hardware with this. But I just want to encourage you just to go nuts and have fun. Try to mess around and make your user interface as informative as you possibly can. And I wouldn't be afraid about getting your account banned. I've been using these for years, and it hasn't happened to me. And now I'm going to even sit here and teach all of you how to do it on YouTube. So unless you see my account get banned over trying to help you guys in this way, I wouldn't be worried about it. Now, I do want to point out there are other tools like Anchor and some others that let you straight up cheat. I would not bot or cheat. That's a good way to get banned and build bitterness amongst the community for being lazy. Don't be that person. Again, I want to thank everybody so much for watching this far. This is part 2 of the Advanced User Interface Guide, where I wanted to talk a lot more about those things. Now, thank you very much for watching, and if you have any other questions, add them to the comments, or if I need to do a part 3 of this, but I think we've covered a lot in all this time. Take care, everybody.